It's a great opportunity for me to introduce him. He is the People Excellence Leader of the CIO organization of Cognizant. And in his role, he focuses on driving behavioral change and performance within the CIO organization. He leads the design thinking initiatives, and he coaches a lot of people in the CIO organization on the design thinking. An engineer by training, Sanjay has been with Cognizant for more than 17 years. And his expertise and deep interest in behavioral science, neuroscience, design thinking, meditation, and mindfulness. He is also a part-time teacher in Art of Living. So we are happy to have you in our community, Sanjay. Thank you. Sure. And the topic is very interesting. It's getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. So,
So this is a TEDx style talk. So I've come up with all the props that I used during my TEDx talk last week. So if you guys not a big fan of TEDx talk, you have to bear with me for the next 18 or 20 minutes. Yeah? I was the only IT guy in the line of speakers, and I realized that IT was not very cool. This was on a campus, Hindustan University. So this actually made me look really cool, believe it or not. Yeah? Okay. All right. So people really started paying attention after this, okay? And there's a lot of, I'm into this recently, but there's also this belief among a lot of the native cultures that, making a sound, blowing the conch shell actually brings prosperity, and more importantly, it brings you to the here and now. It sort of shifts you. Yeah. But I've not always been this adventurous. Okay. So in 1990, I was in 11th standard, preparing for my half-yearly exams, and chemistry was a subject that I was not very fond of. Anything to do with chemistry, I will avoid sort of opening the textbook, reading, all that stuff. So half-yearly exams, I, as usual, did not study chemistry. And then the exam day came, and then I had to usually, take my bicycle. School is about 4 or 5 kilometers away. And I didn't know what to do. I was completely unprepared. So on the way, I parked my cycle in a place where there was not a lot of people around. And I opened my school bag, took out my geometry box, took out the compass, punctured the cycle tire. And then I went home, told my parents that, problem with the cycle, I couldn't make it to the exam. Yeah, I hope they don't watch this video. But, all that changed. And I've had several of, my cycle puncture moments, yeah, in life, throughout. And all that changed about 4 years back when I decided that I am going to really change. I am going to get out of my comfort zone. Yeah? Because, just staying in my comfort zone for so long did not bring me comfort. Ironically, it brought me a lot of discomfort, lethargy, boredom. It was just sucking the life out of me. So I was so desperate for change. So I was very committed that I want to, get out of my comfort zone and hence get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So I've tried a lot of things over the last 4 years. Some things have worked really well. A lot of things have not worked well. So I'm going to share with you 3 things that I believe from my personal experience are fundamental to sustaining this change process. In many ways, I'm still going through the change. As I was coming here, I had butterflies in my stomach. How many people are going to be there? That kind of thing, right? So, when I was doing the TEDx, I had more not butterflies, but bats in my stomach. Yeah, but today I have maybe butterflies in my stomach. So, but I have changed a lot, and it's been very rewarding, even though the change process is by no means complete. So I am more ready to embrace opportunities today than I have ever been, in my life. I have been more productive. Since I've worked on so many things that I was not comfortable with, I've made a lot of mistakes. I've become creative, and I've become wiser, if I may say so myself. Okay? So I'm going to share with you, as I said, 3 things. Sorry, I'll just get rid of this thing. Hold on. It's my Evernote. Oops. This is the problem. Design problem. Oops. Yeah. Okay. Hopefully that should take care of it. Okay. So what are the 3 steps to get comfortable with being uncomfortable? The first one is, I would say, be aware. Be aware of what? Right? So your body, when you're getting into an uncomfortable situation, what I've noticed that your body sends out a lot of signals. Yeah, so all you have to do is pay attention to what's happening, the physiological reaction. So like I said, right? When you walk into a thing like, a talk like this, you don't know what to expect. So there's a little bit of butterflies in the stomach, right? And when you take that, when you're getting ready for that exam that you're not sure how you're going to perform, you have that fear. And every emotion has a corresponding physiological reaction in the body. Yeah? So if you can become aware of that, that's a way of your body telling you that something is off, right? You might be walking into a uncomfortable situation. Yeah? Because the first step is being aware. If you're not even aware, there's no way you can change it. You can you have to go with the default reaction and sort of let it play out. The second one is accepting that is actually happening to you. Yeah? Right? Rather than saying, oh my God, this is happening, or sort of thinking this is some sort of personal flaw that you have. Right? Oh, only me, I'm the only person who has this fear. So that is not going to help. So accepting that, hey, this is a normal physiological reaction that everybody is going to go through. There's nothing wrong with it. So accepting that acceptance will come from a deep understanding of why it is happening in the first place. Right? So if I asked you, how many of you have fear of being on stage? Show of hands. Yeah? 60% of the room here, people here put up their hands. Right? The rest of the 40% are probably afraid to admit that they have afraid about being on stage. Yeah? The point I'm making is that everybody has this. Just wake up to that reality. Right? Because when I started this, I was thinking I am the only person having this problem and all that stuff. No, everybody has it. For some of them, it's being on stage. For some of them, it's being off stage. For some of them, it's talking to strangers. For some of them, it's not talking to people and being alone. I mean, whatever it is, people have their own, sort of phobias and fears. But the point is the mechanism is still the same. And why is it there? Yeah? If you think about yourself, long ago hunting in the forest, looking for food, and then suddenly this big tiger jumps out at you, ready to pounce on you, right? You don't want to be strategizing what you should be doing at that time because you better run. So if you have to run immediately, several things have to kick in, right? Your heart has to start beating faster, the blood flow has to go to your limbs, and you take off, right? That same mechanism which used to help you to escape from that tiger is what is kicking in when you get on stage, right? Or when you're doing that whatever uncomfortable thing that you're doing. So looking at it this way gives you a level of acceptance and sort of get past that, accept that it is happening. That's the second step. And the third one, and the most important step, is what I call making the shift. Making the shift from the default physiological state to a state which will help you become comfortable with the uncomfortable. Yeah? So for example, I've tried, like I said, I've tried a lot of techniques, some version of this. Have you noticed when people come and tell you when you are actually anxious, don't be anxious, be calm. It makes you more anxious. Yeah. So similarly, I've sort of tried to don't be anxious, be calm. Doesn't work, right? And then by accident, about 4 years back, I came across this technique called the Sudarshana Kriya by the Art of Living. It's a rhythmic breathing technique, right? When I started doing it, I realized, I felt, I would say, profound benefits. Okay? And then I started practicing more and more of this. What I realized was there was a science of the breath that I was not aware of at all. And a science that has been around for thousands of years in this country. Yeah? So being an engineer and a techie, I wanted to really understand how does the breath thing work really? How does it really help me get comfortable being in an uncomfortable situation? Yeah? How does it help me embrace things that seems like too dangerous to be involved with? And then I did a lot of research. I'm still doing some research. And I'm going to share with you some of the key kind of insights. Yeah? So this is the first concept that I want you to sort of understand. Maybe you guys, those of you who did biology, biotech, whatever, I think in school we have sort of learned this. There's two parts to the autonomous nervous system, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. The sympathetic is more like the accelerator, right, in your car. And the parasympathetic is more like the brake. And the sympathetic nervous system is associated with the in-breath. So when you breathe in, every time you breathe in, the sympathetic nervous system kicks in automatically. That's why it's called the autonomous nervous system. When you breathe out, the parasympathetic nervous system kicks in automatically. And also when you breathe in, the heart rate goes slightly up. There is excitement in the body, right? The heart rate goes up because it has to pump all the oxygenated blood out. There's more pressure that's required. And then, the reverse. When you breathe out, not so much required, so the heart rate automatically comes down. So essentially, there is a variability in the heart rate with every breath. When you go to the doctor, and the doctor checks your pulse rate, 70 beats per minute, 80 beats per minute, right? That is just the mean, the average. They'll take your pulse for maybe 15 seconds and average it out. But that is not in reality what is happening. The second by second, there is a change in your heart rate, which is known as heart rate variability. Now, this has been around from the 60s, but it has resurfaced in the scientific community, with regards to physical health, performance, stress, all that stuff. Yeah. So this is a sample chart of how a heart rate variability looks on a chart, right? So on the left hand, on the y-axis, you have the beats per minute. On the x-axis, across time, if you chart it, this is how it's going to start looking. And as you see, there are two distinct patterns to this variability, right? The first pattern is what is known as an incoherent pattern. Incoherent pattern is, you see that the randomness to the variability. You don't know how it's actually going to go up or down. And then on the right, it's called a coherent pattern. It's a nice sine curve, right? There is a orderliness to the variability. It goes up, it comes down, right? The incoherent pattern happens when you actually press the accelerator and the brake together. Think about what happens in a car when you press the accelerator and the brake together. That's exactly what's happening in the nervous system, in the physiology. The coherent pattern happens when you press the accelerator independently of the brake, brake independently of the accelerator. So up and down, up and down. Yeah? So making the shift from a physiological standpoint is all about making the shift from an incoherent pattern to a coherent pattern. Because if you manage to make this shift, because that physiology, that kind of a heart rate variability pattern represents stress in your system. You're getting worked up. That's how it looks like. And then a coherent pattern is when you are, say, calm, very clear, composed, all that stuff. So if you want to, make the shift, is you have to really shift the physiology in this way. Now, how do we do that? Okay. And by the way, I took some measurements. I have some device that I'll demo to you in a minute. So this is me rush hour on OMR. That's how it looks like. Okay. And that's probably at the Solingen-Nellur signal. Right there on the top. 120 beats per minute. Waiting for, the signal to turn green. Waiting for my meeting, which I'm already late for. And then this is me doing Sudarshana Kriya. I actually measured myself when I was doing the breathing technique. So you can see there's a distinct difference in the pattern. So now, again, back to the question, how do we shift? So I need a volunteer for this. Please. All right, let's give a big hand for our brave volunteer. Okay? Yeah, please sit. Yeah.
No. I'm Brajendra Nandan Panda. I work in Cognizant. Just completed 1 year today.
Oh, very nice. Okay. So what I have here is a device called the M-Wave 2, which is from an organization called the HeartMath Institute. It's actually a non-profit organization that does research about the science of the heart and the mind. Yeah. I'm going to show you a demo. Hopefully this will work. So can you wear it in one of your ears? Yeah. Yeah. So it has a device. It has a very simple, small device that you can carry around. It has something where you can connect it to your earlobe, and the other one goes into the laptop so that I can show you the readings and so forth. But you can actually carry it around, and then sort of upload it later in the day, all that stuff, right? And the way it works is it senses the blood flow and hence the heartbeat and the rhythm of the heartbeat. That's how it works. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to this desktop software that comes with it. I'm going to actually, let's see. Okay. So it's already starting to calibrate, as you can see. Just look at the one on the top. So the heart rate variability for Mr. Panda, right, is somewhere between 90 and, so how are you feeling right now? Okay. Yeah? Better? Nervous? Slightly nervous, yeah? Because when you, as soon as you see the thing, like you come down, it's going to go up. Yeah? So a little bit nervous, being on stage, right? What result? What am I going to tell you? Yeah, don't worry. Okay? So there's a little bit of nervousness, as you can see. It starts to go up and down, but it'll obviously come down. But there is a pattern that is emerging. Yeah. By the way, I forgot to tell you. It will give you a mild electric shock sometimes. Just kidding. Yeah. See if that actually spikes up your curve. Yeah.
It came down. And it never went up. It never went up. What's happening?
So it's like a lie detector test or something like that. Okay, so as you can see, there is a variability. And what this shows is, by the way, what this shows is that the coherence ratio, he's been measured for about 2 minutes now, coming up on 2 minutes. It's mostly in the incoherent zone. There is this sort of random fluctuation in the heart rate. Yeah? So which means, what it means is that there is a mild amount of stress. Not only stress, even if you're not stressed, we don't pay a lot of attention to how we breathe, and hence there is a lot of randomness in the way we breathe, which actually reflects in our nervous system, which actually reflects in our performance. So if you have to perform at your highest levels, whether it is coming up with creative ideas or working throughout the day without tiring, things like that, you got to keep the system at the optimum level so that it can perform at its peak. Yeah. Now what I'm going to ask you to do is do something. It's called a quick coherence technique. So let's see if we can actually do something with the power of the breath. So as you see the ball move up, you breathe in. As you see the ball come down, you breathe out. That's all you do. Everybody can do that. Yeah. As you see the ball come up, you breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in and breathe out. Very rhythmic. Breathe in, even breath. And breathe out. And see if you can take your attention to your heart region. Feel as if you're breathing through the heart, in and out. Of course, you're not breathing through the heart, but a kind of a, just see if you can take your attention there. Breathe in and breathe out. Yeah, just keep looking at it. And also see if you can take yourself to a very positive emotional state. Maybe think about somebody who gives you a lot of joy, happiness, or a place that gives you a lot of joy and happiness. Maybe your kids, husband or wife, if it's appropriate. Yeah. So breathe in. Yeah. So heart breathing. So this is called heart focused breathing, and also with a feeling, a general sort of positive feeling, and then just keep breathing. So we'll do this for about a couple of minutes so that we get enough data out. And breathe out. Maybe 1 minute, we'll do this. As you can see, he's moved to the green zone already. And he's been sustaining that for some time. All right, so we will go back. You can keep breathing if you want. So I'm going to stop it. Now notice the difference. What happens? Notice the difference. You see the difference? between this pattern and as it starts to change. Yeah? And the heart rate also starts to come down, obviously, because you're breathing slowly. Yeah? So, that's, and see, I mean, this is basically the cumulative score and all that stuff. But essentially, you can take your performance way up just by shifting. And by shifting your physiology, you shift your physiology by really shifting the way you breathe. And that happens when your physiology shifts. How do you feel? Comfortable, right? So it suddenly starts to shift the way you feel between anxiety, how he was feeling maybe 2 minutes ago, to feeling comfortable, So the feeling starts to shift. When the feeling starts to shift, the thinking starts to shift. When the thinking starts to shift, the behavior starts to shift. When the behavior starts to shift, the outcomes will shift for the better. Yeah, and hence you get much better throughput. Yeah, performance. Yeah. So thank you very much. So another round for our volunteer. Very brave. So the next time when you are uncomfortable and you want to get comfortable, so think about the 3 steps, right? Be aware about your physiology. Body is telling you something. Accept it. And all you have to do is breathe evenly and slowly. That's all you have to do. If you did that, your chances of, getting comfortable with the uncomfortable increases dramatically. Yeah? And, what I have realized is that life is more like a conveyor belt. Whether you like it or not, whether you want it or not, you're going to be pushed out of your comfort zone. So you can either make the choice and step out or wait for life to push you out. Either way, it's going to happen. So get comfortable with being uncomfortable starting from right now. So thank you very much.
Environment plays a very major role, right? I mean, can you repeat the same graph in Sholinganallur junction when there are
Yes.
100 people honking at you?
So it's not so much about sustaining in those cases. So even in the graph that I showed you, if you look at my actual coherence, I was basically bouncing out of coherence and back into coherence very fast. So even in that case, my ability to get back into coherence is far greater. That is one. The second thing is, if you practice this sort of thing daily, your nervous system actually will start doing this automatically. There's a pattern, it's a habit that starts to form. And your nervous system will automatically pick it up. So it's not so much about can we be in this state all the time, which I believe is possible, but may not be possible for, say, everyone unless you have a lot of practice. But the key is not so much about being in that state all the time. The key is, can you bounce back? And even if you bounce back and forth, it still makes a huge difference. That's how I would look at it. Any other questions?
Because like we are here talking about, because I've heard people say that you sit in a different position, you'll start acting differently. You stand up, you start acting. So is that the same thing here?
Yes. I mean, when you sit down, your heart rate goes down. When you stand up and start walking, your heart rate goes up. So there is obviously a connection to what you're doing at any given point in time. And obviously, as you said, there is a mind-body connection. Right? So what they have found out is very fascinating research. What they have found out is that there are more connections that are going from the heart to the brain rather than from the brain to the heart. So the HeartMath Institute is all about figuring out the science of the heart. So their thing is, if you really use the heart, so they believe, and not to believe, they're proving this, is that you can actually control the brain through the heart. Because there are, the heart has actually neurons around it, which we did not know until very recently. We thought only neurons are only in the brain and the nervous system. But it's there. The heart actually has, and it has more wattage than the brain. It's much more powerful. It is a much more powerful motor than the brain. So your ability to influence your brain with the heart is probably greater than your ability to intellectualize this and then, feel good in your heart. That's essentially what it is about. But there is a connection between mind, body, emotion, feeling, all that stuff. Well, you had a question?
It's related to what you were saying, right? You said I should think about something. Maybe I'm thinking I'm in a serene place. Forget about my breathing in and breathing out for a moment. So if I just thought that, would my heart rate become like this?
I mean, ultimately you have to get to the breathing part. So you can get to that through various means. You have to first realize you are breathing differently. Through that you can get to changing the heart, the breathing rhythm. Or you can, simple thing you can do is you can start smiling. If you start smiling, automatically there's a biofeedback mechanism. So smiling is not necessarily when you feel happy, you smile. When you smile also, you become happy. It goes the other way. So you smile, automatically your physiology starts shifting. The way you feel starts shifting, the physiology starts shifting, and then that feedback goes back into your nervous system, and then your breathing will automatically start to shift. See, there is a connection between the emotion that you're feeling and the way you breathe. When you're angry, how do you breathe? Very fast. When you're calm, very slow. So you can actually reverse the breath and then feel a different way. It's as simple as that. So that is the science of the breath that I was talking about. That has been documented, but unfortunately we have not been made, it's not been made available to us in the way the other sciences have been made available.
So what you're essentially saying, Sanjay, is that instead of controlling the mind, you control the body, then it will control the mind by itself.
Yes, instead of directly controlling the mind, there's something called as the white bear experiment, right? So close your eyes and don't think about a white bear. All you can think about is a white bear. So that technique is very weak. Only for some people it's going to work. So instead of that, you use the breath. It's a hack. It's a biohack. You use the breath to hack into the system. So you get a handle on how you feel, how do you think, how do you behave, all that stuff. Yeah.
You're going mountain hiking or something like that.
Yeah.
Is that good stress? Because there's a lot of adrenaline in your system.
Yeah. So interestingly, the Sudarshana Kriya that I'm talking about, it's not a state. It's people. Usually when you say Sudarshana Kriya, you think we are like, that's not actually happening. I don't. Is there anybody who's actually done the Sudarshana Kriya here? Yeah, Kavita has done. But it's actually not like that at all. It actually puts you in a very aroused state, brings you down, picks you up, So what it is actually doing is simulating the same conditions that you would have when you are on the treadmill. It's fast, like if you do fast breathing, your heart rate will automatically go up. So it's not so much about just the heart rate alone, right? It's about the rhythm in the heart rate. So you could have a 120 heart rate and still be in rhythm. You could have a 50 heart rate and still be in rhythm. The point is, are you in rhythm? That is more important. Of course, the heart rate is important, don't get me wrong. But by design, you're increasing your heart rate, right? So that is how, so even on the treadmill, if you have this kind of a practice, you can keep it in coherence.
And another question, it might be silly, I've always wondered, why is that you're more creative when you're under pressure? I don't know if you've experienced that.
You are more creative
when you're chasing the deadline.
I think Sukumar and I talk about this a lot because there's a lot of constraints. Number one, as long as you don't buckle under the constraint, you have to embrace the constraint. Embracing the constraint takes, not just guts, but the mindset to embrace the constraint. If you can do that, then a lot of good things happen. But if you say, oh, too many constraints, I can't handle it, then, not much is going to come out of that. That's why people don't understand the power of constraints, because they think it's only constraining. It's not. If you know how to work with those constraints, it can be enormously enabling in a creative process.
Karthik.
Yeah.
You talked about that creativity, right?
Yeah.
I also correlate with what she's saying, but I think I'll try to explain. Probably the state of calmness is also a trigger for creativity, but in a much more healthier way. Constraints or stress triggers creativity. Sometimes we get very creative, but that's not a healthy or a long-term sustainable state, if I can interpret it right. If this is the right way to interpret, sorry.
I mean, it depends on how you take the constraint. If you take the constraint as something that is very limiting to you, and you, as I said, if you are not able to live with that constraint, then it will have definitely, you are causing violence to yourself from a physiological standpoint, no question about it. But if you can, I mean, it's simple, right? Like, I mean, you know, for example, when I did the TEDx talk, right, the opportunity came up. I could have said, like, this is not my thing. You know, because I have only 2 weeks to prepare, this, that, I have nothing to talk about, whatever. So you could have avoided that whole thing because you can't bear that tension, basically. Right? Constraints always bring the tension, and tension is what is needed. You need that creative tension to have creativity. But for you to really be in that kind of state, you need to have the mindset, which means, in my view, it's the physiology, you know, the self-awareness, to actually embrace that constraint. Because if you start embracing that constraint, it's not so much, you know, going to be harmful to you. In fact, it's going to actually help you. It's going to make you more creative, much more productive, all of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, probably I'll restate the question. I didn't probably state it right. What I'm trying to say is that is one way of overcoming and embracing constraint in a positive way.
Yeah.
And we keep doing that in our day-to-day lives. And then we can be successful. But then you're talking about that state of calmness, right?
Yeah.
Where another approach can be, whether I do TEDx or not, I'm at peace.
Yeah.
So, is that a state where creativity can be there?
Yes, equanimity. So neither if you are, if you're not too joyful and super excited, even at that state you can't be creative, because super excitement, there's something going on in your nervous system, you can't be creative. If you're super depressed also, not going to work. I mean, that we all know. So the state of equanimity will really get you to that level where you can really, start performing. Whether it's creativity, whether it's something else, it will start to happen. So it is not so much about the calm state. I mean, I'm just this is a demonstration. But like to her point, you can be on the treadmill and be in an equanimous state. You can be meditating and be in an equanimous state. You can be eating, and, talking, whatever. Like you said, it could be throughout.
Yeah, hi Sanjay. We offer a course at IIT called Self-Awareness.
Yeah.
Where we have the mid-reviews, and HRV is one assessment that we do. And we have.
Oh, you do HRV
yes.
analysis. Very good.
We have installed the HeartMath software in all the systems.
Wow, wonderful.
And we found that the coherence level actually improved.
Yeah.
At the end of that's part of the assessment.
Yeah.
So happy to.
Wonderful. Yeah, I would love to
So
maybe we should talk and see what you guys are doing. Maybe I can learn something.
Right. This is actually mainly offered by Professor Devdas Menon.
Okay.
I can connect you.
Yeah, that'll be great. Wonderful. Yeah.
I have one doubt about your experimental demo.
Yeah.
What I felt is that when the person came and sat here, he was mainly in anxious state because he was under. Everybody was observing him, so
right.
Psychologically he was at a different state. And right. Then you were giving in between some jokes that you will get electric shock or something. Okay. Okay.
Heart rate will be high. Yeah.
Okay.
Take some time to settle down.
Another thing, when the second part of the experiment started,
yeah.
First I felt that his psychological state is changed rather than the physiological. The second state was mixture of both psychological and physiological.
See, as he said, I think it's a mind-body complex. So you can't really say where this originates. All I'm saying is, if you can really shift your psychological state, do that. Because it will shift your physiological state. If you can't do that, shift your physiological state and it will go back. So it's it goes both ways. Depends on what is comfortable for you. Once you understand how the circuit works, you can pretty much figure out how do you want to do this.
Thanks.
Done? You have a question?
So, my question is about the step number 1, be aware. How can I know that what is the signal I'm getting it from my body? For you, it's butterfly. So how can I?
No, see, basically the technique is, again, this comes from the yogic science, is that you don't, look for the bat or the butterfly when the bat or the butterfly appears. It's like climbing Mount Everest like tomorrow. You don't want to do that, right? If you want to climb Mount Everest, you have to climb St. Thomas Mount first. If you can climb St. Thomas Mount, then you take the next one. So essentially what you have to do is you have to bring the body awareness right now. So in the yogic sort of tradition, there is this thing called the yoga nidra. So you just lie down flat on the floor and you just scan your entire body from toe to the top of your head, back to the toe, to the top of your head, back to the toe, to the top of it. That's all you do. What you're actually doing is training to climb Mount Everest. Once you start doing that, you guys can try this experiment. You do this when you're just lying down, before you go to bed, before you go to sleep. Scan. Yeah? Take some points, top of the head, all that stuff, right? Knees, back again. 2 sweeps, 2 or 3 sweeps. You do that daily. After 30 days, 45 days, automatically you will pick up the signal. That's the secret. You don't wait for the, auspicious moment, because at that time, your brain is not in a capacity to pay attention. It's already focusing on, it's narrowing its focus. So that is not a good place to start. If you start there, you will most likely fail. Yeah, Shavasana, exactly. Yoga Nidra. It's called, you can look up on the web. I'm sure this is available everywhere.
Hi Sanjay, it's maybe trivial. How is it connected to SKY? Like, is it
connected
this
to?
one? I just saw that picture actually. This one, your picture. Okay.
The mudra. I mean, forget about the picture. I mean, I just took a picture that was. Nitya, who helped me, my colleague Nitya Radhakrishnan, she helped me with the presentation. So I don't know where she took the picture. I like the picture. But the point is, to your question, this is basically. This is called mudras. Essentially, there is a system of nadis in the body. Nadis are very subtle energy channels. So there are 72,000 nadis, according to this science, in the body. And the entire circuitry for switching where the energy should channelize is in the hands. So this means it will channelize one way, this means it will channelize another way, this means it will be channelized another. And there are like so many mudras that are there. And so all you have to do is, if you go to, some yoga class and all that, they will teach you this stuff. This is not thing, right? So you tell them, I have blood pressure, what should I do? They'll say, do this mudra or something. I don't know what is the thing, but they'll say this. Because what they're actually saying is you change the circuit when you're breathing. And when that happens, the nadi, which is nadi, the channel through which the energy passes, starts to shift. That's why you see, From who? Okay, Sudhir.
Last question. Get his number. If anyone wants to ask any question, they can ask.
He's asking?
Yeah.
Yeah. Vastu. See, it's like there's something called as choice architecture in design. I don't know if there are any designers here. That is, it's like this. The simplest example I can give you is, you go home, you're on a diet. You don't want to eat chips. What is the design you come up with? Don't have chips. It's as simple as that. Why do we pay tax? Because it's deducted at source. By design. Okay? That's choice architecture. Vastu is just taking it at a different level. That is, everything affects everything in the universe. I mean, I'm not trying to convince you. I'm just telling you the logic of what this is, right? So, which means this projector could be affecting my sort of everything is energy, right? So, it could be affecting my signal or whatever, right? My energy. Vastu Shastra is all about designing something so that you can utilize whatever is in the environment so that you will be at an optimum level. Now, that doesn't mean without Vastu Shastra, you are gone. You see, there are other things you will pick up. So when the temples were built, they were built like that so that when you go in, choice architecture automatically kicks in. So it's not like I should meditate and all that. You go in, you feel that thing and then this thing. Now whether you believe it or not, this is the science behind Vastu Shastra. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Sudhir. Yeah, now I can hear you. Tell me.
Actually, my heart rate is up quite a big deal because I'm speaking to you in front of a lot of people, but now you got the mobile phone up there, that's fine. So, here's my question. You talked about actually find ways out because of the adrenaline that rushes to the head, and that's creativity as well. So I was just trying to figure out what the difference is between those two states of mind. So
yeah, I got your question. So again, yeah. So the thing is, so Sudhir, the thing is not necessarily about the heart rate. Because the heart rate cannot be down all the time, it cannot be up all the time. It has to go up and it has to come down. Okay, all right. So the heart rate cannot be up or it cannot be down. It has to oscillate, right? So the question is, the way to think about it is not so much whether my heart rate is up or down. If the heart rate is up, which means you have more pressure in the system. That's all it means, right? And if it goes beyond certain limits, it's very dangerous. When the heart rate is down, that means the pressure is low in the system. And even if it goes below a certain level, you will faint. Yeah? Well, I won't go into that. But, so the thing is, it's not so much about whether the heart rate is up or down. Whether is it coherent? That's the question you have to ask yourself. If it is coherent, chances are your performance will be very high. Whether it's creativity, productivity, energy levels, whatever it is. And that's what the research shows. You can go to HeartMath Institute. We have research going on right here, and then see what's going on. Yeah. So don't just look at just the heart rate. Look at the heart rate. Obviously, it's important, but also look at heart rate variability. And I believe that heart rate variability will become probably more important than just BP, blood sugar, things like that. You're going to see, because these devices are just coming out, it's going to be available to a lot of people. And you're going to see a lot more people measuring their heart rate. I mean, I have it on my iPhone. I mean, you can actually use the camera and it will show you your heart rate variability. There are free apps that are available on the iPhone today. It's not as sophisticated as this one, but it's available. And it's going to determine, because what they're saying now is they can determine how long you're going to live based on measuring your heart rate variability for 24 hours. Yeah. Sounds scary. Yeah, that's why I'm mentioning it at the end. Sorry? Yeah, of course there are things like that. It's just a better predictor of health and well-being is what I was getting at. Yeah? Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you very much, Sanjay. So I request Ramaswamy sir to give a memento to Sanjay Radhakrishnan. I request Sukumar to share this memento too.
For the next month, we have one speaker already confirmed. Professor Devdas Menon has agreed to speak. Yeah. So, and Professor is going to speak on the three gunas of Prakriti, which is Tamas, Rajas, and. Okay, fine. Yeah. And I think we also had one more foreign lady who had volunteered to speak on, this lady has actually came to India and she got so overwhelmed by the country. She liked the country so much, she decided to settle in India, started a business here, and she wanted to speak on her Indian experience. So we might have that speak also.
And the next meeting is on March 20. And I have seen many newcomers here. Please subscribe yourself in K Community Chennai. There is a Facebook ID. And so in Twitter, AshKCC37. Thank you everyone. Have a nice week. Bye.